Welcome to another focused learning interview. Today we have with us Juha Nieminen from the Faculty of Social Sciences, Tampere University in Finland. Big welcome to you, Juha. And today we are going to be exploring the education of youth workers in the formal education system, particularly in your university and in Finland in general, and exploring a little bit the priorities and challenges. So big welcome to you, Juha.
Thank you very much, Nick. It's a pleasure to be here.
So why do we need to educate youth workers in universities, in the formal education system?
Yes, that's a big question, and in a way a basic question, and it's behind our university education too. So I think that youth work must be done with thought. Yes, with thought. So the youth worker has to be familiar with society, the living conditions and life course of young people, and also human development in adolescence. And youth workers must also understand the rationale for the methods they use and the ethical issues behind them. So training provides an opportunity to expand understanding and to deepen knowledge. So I think that youth work must be done with thoughts.
And what areas are you covering then? You mentioned a few there in terms of, linking to thoughts, but what other subject areas are you covering in the university when you're training youth workers or educating youth workers?
Okay, yes. So nowadays our university education is multidisciplinary. So we are in the Faculty of Social Sciences, and we have a study line of youth work and youth research there. So youth work and youth research, they are the main subjects or the contents of our education. But we have also contents from educational sciences and from many social sciences. So that's a big difference if we compare the university education of former days. Nowadays, it's more multidisciplinary.
So is there a big connection between the youth work studies, for example, and social services studies?
Oh, yes. So our study line, youth work and youth research, it's a part of the degree program of social sciences. So a part of our teaching comes from the degree program of social sciences. So there is, I would say, a close connection to the social sciences, yes.
And is it a requirement of youth workers in Finland to have a university education, or is this an optional thing in order for people to improve themselves and improve the quality of their work if they want?
Okay, there is no official requirements for youth workers in Finland. So it's for the students and people themselves to show their competency, yes.
And do the students have an opportunity to specialize in specific areas of youth work, or it's more of a generic education about youth work?
Okay, yes. So our master degree has some obligatory studies. They are in a way general studies, and they cover a wide field of youth work and youth research. But in our degree program, it's possible to take also optional studies. And with those optional studies, every student can specialize in some area. But because we are in an academic university, so the contents of the studies are at the general level usually, but by the means of the optional studies, you can also specialize in certain things. But our students, they come from different fields of youth work, and after the studies or during the studies, they used to go to different fields of studies, different fields of youth work, yes.
And has it been a long tradition in Finland, the education of youth workers through the university system?
So yes, Tampere University is the only academic university giving a degree on youth work and youth research.
Okay.
And we started, or Tampere University and its predecessor started in 1945. So this is the 76th year we are offering university education of youth work. So it's a long tradition. It has been there for decades. Of course, the institutions and the contents and the structures have changed during these decades.
Yeah.
Yes, but so this is the 76th year.
Wow, right. That's incredible. Is that one of the oldest courses, you think, in Europe?
One of the oldest, so we can say. So I tried to make some kind of investigation, and of course there are difficulties comparing the education system or institutions in this field. Some of them are straight in the field of youth work, and some are connected, but one of the oldest.
Yeah. What about the concept of learning in youth work? How does that feature within the courses that you're offering from Tampere University?
Okay, yes. So personally, first I see this conversation of learning in youth work somehow as a return of learning to youth work. So the discussion about learning in youth work has been inside the education of youth work in Tampere University for decades, but of course in the context of different times with different concepts and different theories. And during this interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary era in our university's youth work education, so the amount of learning in youth work hasn't been very big. So we had more about learning in youth work in those days when our education was connected with the educational sciences more. But nowadays, so I have courses of youth work and courses of youth education, and the theme of learning is a part of those courses. So to say so, yes, there is something nowadays about learning in youth work, but not as much as before when the focus of the education was in educational sciences.
Yeah. And would you like to see more focus on this in the future within the youth work program?
So I think so, because of this strengthening discussion at the European level. Learning in youth work is becoming more popular, or the discussion is relatively strong nowadays. So I think we have to put and take it into account in our program too, and especially the courses of youth work and youth education are very suitable for discussions about learning. Of course, we have to remember that in our university we have also educational sciences, and it is possible for our students to take educational sciences as optional studies. But of course, in the educational sciences in the Faculty of Education, so there is not so much about youth work. So I think we should take care of the learning in youth work ourselves. So I think in the future we will have more of it. And for example, this project, Focus Learning, will help. So there is and there will be good material to use in those subjects.
And in terms of the education of youth workers, obviously you're the university system. Is there a connection also with the non-formal education side of the education and training of youth workers within Finland, for example?
Well, the educational system and the concepts of youth work education, they are a little bit different. So in the, I will say, official system of education, we don't have this concept of non-formal education, but in the case of our degree program and study line, so many of our students have been involved in youth organizations. They have done non-formal education. They have taken part in the training of the organizations. And when they come to our program to study, they used to bring their knowledge and their competency. And I will say the communication between the study line and the students it brings so the formal education in the university and the non-formal education together. Yeah. So through the cooperation and communication with students. Yes.
Yeah. And when someone goes through, I mean, the people who are entering the courses, you mentioned a master's degree, I assume there's a bachelor program. Are these new youth workers, or they can also be experienced youth workers?
So the master degree and our study line in the master degree is the main way of organizing youth work and youth research education. And most of our students are experienced youth workers. So they are adult students, and many of them are working at the same time when they are having their studies. We have also younger students, and some of them come from the bachelor level, but most of our master degree students, they are adult students, and most of them have done their lower exam in the universities of applied sciences.
Yeah. Okay.
So they used to come from the universities of applied sciences to Tampere University to get the master degree.
Yeah. And this links back to what you were saying before then, in terms of people having experience, that they're also bringing in their experience of the non-formal education system, which, if I understood correctly, is then supporting the education program that you have within the university.
Yes, that's the way. And one point about this connection between university education and non-formal education is that the biggest, I will say, learning task in master degree is, of course, the master thesis.
Yeah.
And many of our students do their master thesis of the topics that are connected with the non-formal education. So that's one path.
Okay.
Also, yeah.
Yeah. What do you think is the future for youth worker education?
Okay. Yes. So the predicting the future is always difficult.
Yeah.
And if we think about the position of youth work education at the university, it's also influenced, for example, by educational policy, the position of the youth work profession, and also the topics of interests of the students. So nowadays the situation at the Tampere University is better than it has been for a long time. So our study line of youth work and youth research is a part of the normal teaching structure of the university, of the normal degree structure. And there are many applicants for our master studies each year. In the future efforts must be made both to maintain the core of education and also to renew it in a timely manner. So I see the future quite positive, but a lot of work has to be done.
Mm. And we've talked a bit about the connection between the non-formal education and the formal education, and it's do you also see that as something that will build in the future, having more connection between these approaches to education?
Okay, yes. So we have to see and think that young people used to grow and learn a lot outside the formal educational system too. And I think it has been already recognized. And it means that in the youth work education, we have to put also more focus on non-formal education.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, one field is going to be the youth work in schools, because
Mm-hmm.
nowadays it's a very, I would say, popular topic, and little by little more common way of doing youth work. But when thinking and finding the place and role of youth work in the school, it's also a question of non-formal education. So how to do non-formal education connected with school, and youth work is in a way a key agent in that area. So I see that quite a fruitful area, but also a challenging.
What are going to be some of the challenges you think that you're going to be facing in the next few years?
Okay, yes. So perhaps it's so that to renew, well, at the same time, yes, to maintain the core of the education of youth work, and also to renew it in a timely manner. So to keep your hand in the core things of youth work and youth work education, and at the same time to innovations and to renew the education of youth work at the same time. So that's always a challenging thing.
Yeah.
And there seems to be three trends in youth work education, which are, I would say, relatively new. This is always a little bit difficult for me to say what is new, because during these decades there have been a lot of reforms and innovations, and some of them are part of the normal education nowadays. Well, some of the innovations they have been buried quite quickly after them. But the first is the digital youth work and the online teaching. So it has strengthened a lot during last 2 years because of the pandemic. Of course, e-learning and e-teaching as such, they are not new things. So there have been some kind of e-learning and e-teaching for, I will say, 20 years.
Yeah.
So to take care and to adapt reasonable ways of doing e-learning and e-teaching in academic university, which is based on research and in theories. That's one challenge. The second is the ongoing internationalization of the youth education. So there seems to be a lot of discussion and emerging cooperation of youth work education and youth work educators at the European level.
Yeah.
And we also want to be a part of that process. Yeah. Of course, international issues are not totally new thing. So in 1945, there were already some kind of international things. So we always have to remember that we are building on the grounds of the previous times. But yes, we want to be a part of this I would say movement, which can be seen just now about the international cooperation in the field of youth work education. And we are also strengthening our own international teaching. And perhaps the third trend, and in a way a challenge, is the co-research. So in the field of youth research, there is a strengthening movement towards co-research, so the cooperation between the researchers and young people. And that is, and it can be very fruitful area for the university education of youth workers, because there is this communication and cooperation between youth researchers and young people, and between youth workers and young people. And somehow we should combine these two things, because we are doing research in the university, and in our master degree we have students, quite experienced youth workers, and they are also doing their master thesis. So this idea of co-research, it's a challenge.
Wow.
And also a possibility.
Particularly this last part that you've been exploring there and sharing with us, I personally find very, very interesting. I go back a little bit to the European Youth Work Convention, and I know it's not a new thing, but I think for me it's where it started to be talked about, is the concept of the community of practice. And for many years, I think we've been a little bit narrow, or many of us have been narrow focused in thinking of the community of practice as the youth worker, the researcher, the policymaker. But actually, it's much broader than that. And it includes the young people themselves. It's also about youth work managers. It's also people who are not directly involved in the youth sector, but teachers like yourself, who, well, you are directly involved in the youth sector, sorry, but I'm also meaning people who work in municipalities who maybe have responsibility for youth sport culture, whatever combination. They're still part of the community of practice. And it's very interesting to hear. I know you're talking about researchers here, but expanding our horizons in the sector. Say, we don't have to do things like this just because we've always done it like this. We can also do it like this, and we can involve these people and this part of the community of practice. I think this is really, really important, and this is a very interesting development that you're sharing here. Sorry, there's not a question in there, but
yes, I can agree with your comment. Yes, and there are some, I will say, ideas or even theoretical bases. So in the field of youth research, so the participative research or the research strategies like that, they are very useful. And also, so the participation is one of the guidelines, or I will say one highlight of youth work nowadays. So those ideas or perspectives can be combined, and it's a possibility for the university education, for the students who are experienced, and also with younger students who have learned that kind of new methods and ways of doing research. And of course, because youth work nowadays, we do youth work in cooperation with different organizations, with different fields, with different fields of administrations. So we can yes widen those communities of practices.
Yeah.
Yes. So I agree with you.
Yeah.
So it's not easy.
No.
Always. There are challenges,
like
you asked, but in a way I see very exciting and fruitful direction for youth work and youth work education too.
Yeah, so it's an interesting balance of intersectoral cooperation and intra-sectoral cooperation. Cool. Sorry, go on. Yes.
Oh yeah, please continue. Yes.
No, I'm aware of time and that we need to start wrapping up. So I'm just going to throw it open to you, and if you have any last comments about the education of youth workers or learning in youth work, what would you like to share as a close of this chat?
Okay. Yes. So perhaps the one thing is, because I myself, because the main areas of my teaching and research are the foundations of youth work, in a way, the basic questions. So theory of youth work, the history of youth work, the structure of youth work, as well as the professional and educational issues of the field. So I've been thinking quite a lot about this learning in youth work. And yes, I think so that learning is almost always present in youth work. It's there, whether we are aware of it or not.
Yes.
Whether we like it or not. And now, because from my point of view, this recent conversation is a return of learning to youth, a return of learning to youth work. So let's keep the discussion going on. So we need research. We need scientific research. We need practical experiences, and we need this kind of cooperation at the European level to investigate this thing, to discuss this thing called learning in youth work.
Super. And I think that is the perfect moment to close this this interview. Thank you so much for joining us today, Juha. It's been a real pleasure to listen to your thoughts, and yeah, I'm excited, especially with your closing statement there. I think there are some really interesting steps ahead of us in the world of learning in youth work. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. It was so nice to have a chat with you.
Cool.